morning, happy Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday-ish. Tuesday? I don't know, I've lost track of time. Happy Tuesday, this is Anne, your host of Reaper Pro Tips, here with my co-chair, disembodied voice Justin, at least briefly. He'll be typing. Disembodied hands Justin will be typing. Yes, he's okay. Yes, several places in Denton are lacking power. I know because I just talked to one of my friends. So apparently I missed the record snowfalls in Denton, guys. I'm like so sad. Like the ghost of Kiri is frolicking out there. Kiri loved snow. When she was younger, she would run around the yard with her mouth wide open and lower her head so she could just shovel the snow up into her mouth. And then she'd end up with this mountain of snow on her nose. It was really adorable. Yes, the sploosh is here. It's getting to be spring in Texas. The flowering trees are starting to flower here. Not Texas, California. North California. So, yeah, I was walking yesterday and the flowering trees were starting to burst into pink. So, move back and experience it the next time. No, thank you. I like having power right now. Remember, I'm an Anne who is very bad with cold. Like, I moved away from Wisconsin for a reason. And I love heat. So when it was record heat in Texas, I was all fine with that. But yeah, record cold, and I like snow for the first day or two, and then I'm just like, okay, we can be gone now. So yeah, not gonna do it. It was rainy here yesterday, Chef. But now we got a partly sunny day. Yesterday we were going to take a hike out in Santa Cruz and we got rained out pretty much. Plus, just taking care of the back. But my back is feeling okay. Like, it was definitely improved over the weekend. I'm exercising it, so it's a little sore here and there, but it's otherwise doing well. I did my stretches this morning. Yeah, a bit more in Ontario than Texas, right? And you're used to it in Ontario, too. T-shirt weather, yeah. So speaks like a Wisconsinite or Minnesotite or, Canadite, Michiganite. Any of those people, any of those places, the Dakotas can also kind of like say, oh yes, it's still T-shirt weather when it's 45. Yeah. I knew people like that in Wisconsin who were in shorts when it was 45 degrees. No, not me. But I'll watch you all melt when it's 108. And I'll be like, it's a little toasty out today. You can feel the air whoosh out of your lungs when you open your mouth. I'm alright, Val. It's okay. I had a long weekend, so that usually helps me kind of regenerate. That's really nice. Oh, you're just north of Wisconsin. North of Winnipeg. Ah, yeah, so you were the Arctic zone. I see. I didn't know you were that far north, Rex. Wow. Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin. My family's still there. Most of my immediate family, anyway. And my mom's is from around Portage, Wisconsin, which is south central. Oh, now you have sludge, which will turn into ice if it freezes, Cookie Tigress. That's the worst. I used to hate that. Like when you got the snow, but then it would freezing rain, and then it would freeze again, and then you would have the do not go on the roads for fear of your life. Even if you could drive on it, everybody else can't. Yeah. So let's go to troll face. Oh, okay. So you've been all over the place. That's kind of like me. I also was a military brat for the early part of my existence, Rex. I was born here in Mountain View, and then we went to Virginia. My dad was in the Navy. And then we went to Illinois, and then we ended up in Wisconsin. And then I moved back out to Baltimore, and then I moved down to Texas, and now I'm out here. So we've done the double loop here. Hey, Trouble. Yeah, ice is yuck. 2 inches on 1 inch of ice. That's just treacherous. You learned how to cold box your bathroom. You can't melt me. Yeah. Yeah, well, I remember, like, stepping outside, and it was still 102 at, like, 8 p.m. when I was taking my walk in the summer. Last summer, I was in Texas. So, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I mean, it still sucks. Don't get me wrong. You're still like, really? Really, world? It's 102 and it's 8 p.m.? But, Mostly it sucked because it's much more humid in Texas than it is in a place like, say, Arizona. But then again, in Arizona, they also probably hit 120, 125, so... Oh, sleep. Man, everybody's having, like, lousy weather. Hey, Troll. Troll, I need some black indigo. I need some gray. Oh, where'd my Dungeon Gray go? It's still in its box. Yeah. Yeah, I was talking with my ex this morning, and he does not have power. Which probably means Reaper doesn't have power, because he's just down the road from Reaper. He's also near Ed. But yeah. Weather, what you gonna do? So let's mix up some of our happy little... Remember, we were using Dungeon Gray as a base for everything else. So we'll get a nice puddle of that going. We'll get a shady puddle of black indigo, which was the shading color we were using on this model. And using this color to shade pretty much everything is giving it a very integrated look. Like, the whole model looks like it belongs together. All your pipes are frozen. Oh, Valandar. What are we learning today? We're learning that because of Anne's back troubles, it took her 3 shows to paint a base that should have taken 1. That's what we're learning. That's what we're learning, Gergie. So, so my aim and goal is to do a water pool here, but I have some mushrooms to paint here, and I started on the base last week. And we're just pretty much going to get this all going on over the whole surface of everything. And I'm going to do it I'll probably do it pretty rough. It doesn't have to be super smooth for basing. But I'm trying to suggest the light sourcing still, that it's coming from, you know, right up here. So I'm trying to figure out where my shadows are and leave the back of things pretty dark. Although you can suggest, you know, a little bit of detail with bounced light, and you should. You should never just leave it black. Much as in the French painting tradition, Jeremy Bonamont was famous for that. It would just paint the front of the model, because it's all in shadow in the back. I always felt like that was really cheating. You're always going to have some bounce light from somewhere. Yeah, it's going to be water. Oh no, not lava. Look at him, he's a cave troll. There's stalagmites. And little tiny stalagmites and mounds and mushrooms. That means no lava, unless they're lava-loving mushrooms, but I'm just not into that. Just does not seem... Right. But yeah, but we have to lay down all our paint before we could do water effects. Water effects are always the last thing you do. Water and gloss effects, in my opinion, always the last thing. Because for one thing, we want to kind of suggest probably, I was thinking about this morning, I want to suggest a little bit of texture in the bottom of this pool. And then I want to layer in a couple of layers of water effects. And then if I'm going to do a reflective effect, then I want to do that probably over the top and then put gloss over the top of that. So I want a little bit of degrees of separation, 3-dimensionally. It won't be much, it's microns, hardly, because I don't have much pool here to work with, but anyway, where's my orange? My orange. -35 where you are, yuck. Yeah, but at least you're prepared for it, Rax. Like, some states just aren't, they're just in denial. Alright, and we got some goblin orange, which I was mixing, goblin skin. A very utility orange, which everybody should own. Utilitarian. Alright, and I don't know that we need any red or yellow. I'm going to leave those off the plate for now. But I am going to put down my other friend, Vampiric Mist, which is our white for this project. Hey there, Bob and Julie. How's it going? Good morning. Is it cold in Arizona? Everybody else is talking about how frigid it is. And Texas is getting hit. 60 degrees. Yay for Bob and Julie. You're even warmer. You're warmer than us up here. We have the freaking ocean effect, I assume. What is it now? It was 45 this morning. Now it's 54. So we're almost as warm as you. I would like it to get back into the 70s. I want spring. I'm ready for spring. Yeah. That's cold. 83 in Tampa. Sorry, not sorry. Welcome to Florida. The reason people keep living there. Well, that and the cool Salvador Dali Museum. I liked that when I was there. You guys have some cool cultural places. Alrighty, let's see here. Let's just start. I think I was starting by mixing a little bit of my orange into my Dungeon Gray. Wanted to warm it up just a tad. It's going to green it out just a little. I think I talked about why that is. It's going to green it out because there's so much yellow in this, and when you mix it into something with so much black, you get green. The way to cancel green is to add red, so you add a touch of your kobold scale. And that should help take the green down and bring it back in a natural earthy brown direction. This is how you actually mix brown with these colors. Along with probably a little bit of our yellow. But the more red you put in, the more green you counteract until you get a kind of sludgy, good sludgy color. And let's see here. I probably want a little bit of white in there because I'm going to be highlighting. We're going to pop some water in there. 50 in Scotland. Sounds like you're like our weather right now, Kerniko. Maybe you're rainier though. I don't know. I remember I was in Scotland in March one year, and all I remember is daffodils freaking everywhere in Edinburgh. And actually, I was on my walk yesterday, and I saw a daffodil. Somebody had them in their yard, and I recognized them right away from my trip to Scotland. So I texted Mom, and she's like, "Hey, you're learning your flowers," and I'm like, "This is only from the trip to Scotland, Mom. Don't get excited." Mom's mom, our grandma, really loved flowers. Like, she planted them all over the place. And she knew all the names. So Mom likes it when I know the names of flowers. I don't remember. It was just like a whole, like, hillside of them. Kerniko. We were in Edinburgh, and we were just wandering around, really. We were just walking around the city downtown. It was actually, like, I have very vivid memories of that trip. Later in the trip, sadly, I got really ill. And couldn't enjoy St. Andrews and stuff like that. But earlier in the trip, I remember I have lots of vivid memories from Scotland. Scotland and a different trip to Ireland that I took. I really would like to go back one of these days. Once the plague permits us to travel again. So we're shading in the back underneath his foot. Let me get this out of scene so that you guys can actually see stuff. Hey, Sadie. Or Sadel. Or Sadelac. Or however you sad. I don't want to call you sad, though. But thank you for the sub. Thank you for the Prime sub. It's a brand new, fresh Prime sub. You've never subbed us before. Thank you so much. Let's see. I think I need more Dungeon Gray, just regular, though. I mixed up my nice kind of warmish grayish brown and... Hey, wow, 18 months. So total diametrically opposed there. Yeah, with the castle on the top. Yeah, that's right. We went behind the castle. We took the castle tour, and then we walked down. So yeah. I just remember zillions of daffodils. I was very impressed. Because yellow is my favorite color next to purple. So I am a daffodil fan. I'm a fan of friendly, happy yellow flowers. Yeah, 18 months is a lot, Nomedzik. Like, we almost should throw a little party when you guys hit 24. You and Deke Clearman and the rest of you guys who have a very early sub. Throw a little online party. Everybody can have a double sub-anniversary. Just mixing up some stuff. Yeah, you could certainly go crazy with them. I did them simpler. Let me get my in focus. I did them a bit simpler just because, you know, we're on stream and I have to get it done in, like, not forever. So I showed people how to do it crazy with the big crystal up there on the right. And then I did a lot more generalization and just kind of quick stuff on the other crystals. Because when you're not aiming, like, for a competition quality paint job, you certainly don't have to be exacting on all of the smaller crystals. But in general, the way to carry it off is just to make sure that your light source is correct for all of them, and then your shadow behind it. Then you can kind of generalize, and it works. Where is my brush? I need a brush. Like, not my mixing brush, because I actually did dig out a mixing brush, so I would stop abusing my other brushes. I think I need some white in that orange, though. There, that's a little bit better. I'm just playing with my colors until I get something that's kind of close to what I had back there. I'm trying to match what I did on the back here. You got mugged by a squirrel in the gardens? Wow, Kuroniko. Was he arrested? Did he get your purse? Did he want your money or just your nuts? Or your sandwich, or whatever squirrels mug people for in the gardens. I imagine they're quite inventive, and being city squirrels, they probably don't care about nuts and acorns and all the rest of it. They're probably like, you know, oh, that pastrami sandwich looks fantastic. Like, are they carnivorous now? I wouldn't put it past squirrels. Although the squirrels around here are adorable and also really coolly colored. I like the squirrels around here. We have copious amounts of them being on the crossroads between two parks. They like to run up and down the trees outside of our deck. Or not deck. Balcony. Hey, Grey Wolf, thanks for the cheer. Getting mugged by animals is a special type of struggle. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to go back to Edinburgh. It sounds really cool. Yeah, if there's an armory. McDonald Armories. David, make a note. He went into your bag and stole a cheese and onion pastry? I knew that squirrels had become... Well, he wasn't carnivorous, at least. Except for the butter. The butter is, you know... Because pastry equals butter, unless it was done with shortening. But that sounds... That's pretty hilarious, actually, Kuroniko. He decided pastries were his kind of food. To heck with this acorn crap. To heck with nuts and seeds. I want a good cheese and onion pastry. That squirrel had cojones. I admire that squirrel greatly now. Yes, they had him committed because he was nuts, Tazlanch. Exactly. Alright, Crowley, you're working on your limited palette challenge with white, black, clear blue, yellow, and magenta, and I realize that you need to paint an axe without using a metallic. Any suggestions? Easy. You've got white and black. You can do silver very easily. Just add a tiny touch of clear blue to it. And I mean tiny. You don't want it to be a blue-gray necessarily. You just want to have something else in there other than white and black. Carly, if you want to mix golds, i.e. browns, that's a little bit harder there, but you can still do it. You're going to use a very large front load of yellow. You're going to add in some magenta to get an orange, and then add in either black or blue, just a tiny touches to darken it. What you're looking with the black and blue is not to add the color so much as you're looking to darken it. Black can add an ashy tone. So sometimes blue is a little bit easier because you're essentially muting out the red and yellow. You're making an orange. And then blue is the complementary. So when you add it, it'll darken it and also mute it. And essentially muting an orange makes it into a brown. So then you use that as your base for your NMM. And then you use more of the yellow and magenta to highlight it up and white to finish your highlights. So yes, you can do NMM absolutely with a 5-color palette. It's a little bit, it'll teach you some mixing. Remember that yellow is a lot weaker than your magenta, so use a ton of yellow with just a touch of magenta at first. Squirrels back in NYC would eat pizza. I believe it, Big Apple. Oh, I bet, Suru. Yeah, deer can be bullies. Like, as being from Wisconsin, I understand this thing. Deer, when they're fearless of humans and you have a tasty, deer can really be intimidating. They walk up to you and they're like, hey, I can almost look you in the eye and I've got 3 friends. And we would really like your rice crackers right about now. And you'll be like, holy, and you're so like freaked out at being bullied by a deer of all things that you just give in. I think they've made an art out of it. Animals are funny. So what excites me is out here, we have black squirrels, which I love. They're intense and they bite. Yes, they do. Pizza is delicious. These squirrels, the squirrels around here are wary enough. Like, they'll kind of flip to the other side of the tree when you walk by if they're, like, at all older. So they're not, like, walk up to you and eat your food squirrels. Like, I've encountered chipmunks at Yellowstone who are the boldest little freakers ever. They're obviously so accustomed to being fed by tourists. One came up and sat on my shoe. And they're adorable, but they really are trying to, like, you know, strong-arm you for your food. Yeah, everybody thinks deer are, like, happy little Bambi things that never attack people. Yeah, no, deer can be biters. I think deer are tasty, so I personally have no compunctions about their cuteness. Venison is tasty stuff. Venison chili is super tasty. So I'm adding some white. So these are the colors I'm using, guys. So I've got my base Dungeon Gray, which is just a little bit colder and darker than this mixture I did of it with orange and white. With a little bit of the Kobold scale too to warm it up. Now this is kind of where I'm adding in the brown in the cave floor, just warm touches to offset this cold indigo here. So kind of to suggest the light source like I did on these little back rocks here. So I'm doing the same thing up here with the same sort of colors. It's very rough and pocky. I mean, it is the ground, right? It's the floor. And Troll isn't super smooth anyway, so I don't feel the need to go totally super smooth on him. But if I wanted to smooth this out afterwards, I could just do a layer of Dungeon Gray over the top of it. I'd want to punch my highlights a little bit first so that I didn't drop everything down, or I'd want to come back in and highlight a little bit more. So, oh, seagulls. Oh yeah, they will totally, and they're mean. Like, seagulls are meanies. You currently have deer in your freezer, so it's all good. No, Zeke, I'm jealous. I don't currently. I have lamb, but not, quite a bit of lamb, actually. And pork shoulder. Yes, deer can absolutely beat you in a fight. Elk can totally beat you in a fight. And we don't even talk about moose. Moose are, like, crazy. I don't know how there even still are Canadians in Canada, considering how mean moose are. Like, why have the moose not taken over at this point? But yeah, I love our black squirrels around here, and every once in a while you get, like, what's obviously kind of a mix genetically, where it's kind of a sable squirrel, like a normal squirrel, but really dark. But you can still see the patterning. It's really pretty. So yeah, lots of black squirrels and gray squirrels around here. I do like watching their antics. We had gray squirrels in Texas. Had a few of them around us. We didn't have as many trees as we do here. Alright, so I'm using some mixed Dungeon Gray and Black Indigo because I don't want the real strong blue, but I want some shadows to kind of outline my little mushroom here. I'm also going to kind of bring out some detail here around the stalagmites for when I come in to highlight them. I want to pick in... I just want to bring out just a little bit of detail here in the stone. Want something other than gray. So we're just kind of using that mixture of indigo and dungeon to kind of add some dimension. Go around behind back of the mushroom there. Add a little bit darker if I really want that mushroom to stand out. Seagull and an eagle. You do not mess with them. Yeah, it sounds like they must look like kind of ospreys, huh? That's really funny, Muses. So that was a very friendly moose, considering all the nasty stories I've heard from Canadian friends about moose. And how dangerous and terrible they are. The great and powerful moose. But that moose must have been an exception. That's funny. That's funny that he would come in to be petted. Sometimes animals are just, like, awesome. The zoo worker was freaking out. Yeah, I would too. Moose can be dangerous. Can you imagine the liability? If a moose wandered into your zoo and you got, like, you know, and actually went bazonkers on people. And it's like, well, I couldn't ask him to leave because he's a moose and I didn't want to provoke him. Yeah, that would be scary. It would scare me. Definitely, definitely an increase in blood pressure and adrenaline if that happened. Brown seagulls on steroids. Wow. Yeah. I mentioned ospreys just because they're like notorious for like if you have like a koi pond or something, you know, they're notorious for coming down and stagging your koi. If you live in an area with them. I saw the last one I saw was actually in Florida. On the bridge to Fort Myers. I saw an osprey. I love it when I see wild animals in more urbanized settings just because I actually get to see them, but I also worry for them. Alright, so we're getting our shading. I tend to work on shading first when I'm working on anything in particular. I tend to work down first and then I work up. Because I feel like I don't know how high I need to highlight unless I have my shadows in place. Wow. Young, that's crazy. Encounters with moose. I'm glad that none of these encounters are lethal. Or were lethal. Yeah. Well, I mean, they gotta eat. We kind of invaded all their territory and started fishing up all their fish, so if they're trying to steal our fish in return, I really can't blame the ospreys. There's also a lot fewer of them than there are of us. They are beautiful birds. My sympathies tend toward the wildlife in all of these exchanges because I just feel like we've screwed over the planet. So yeah, we've got to feed people, but we also probably like should have enough food for the animals to actually exist. So I feel like people could do a better job on that. Then we wouldn't have maybe so much clashing between our species. Probably because my parents did stuff like take us to Yellowstone. I grew up with a sympathy for and appreciation of nature. Ideally, I think we'd broker some kind of, you know, arrangement where everybody was happy, but that's just me, you know, looking for animal person utopia. Alrighty. So we've got our shadows blocked in on the front for the most part here now. It looks pretty good. The animals deserve to live. Exactly, Francis. Ospreys are rare here. Yeah, persecuted pretty badly. Good. Yeah, I mean they're really cool birds. And like I said, I mean, yeah, your people are important, but you know, so are your animals. And the animals don't eat as much as the people. I don't know. It's hard. Like it can be hard to balance, I bet. If I had been this socially conscious as a kid, I probably would have gone into something more less art and more socially conscious as a career, but they didn't at least where I grew up in the Midwest, you were not encouraged to take on a socially conscious career. They didn't really exist in the 80s. Okay, that's putting it like way too extremely, but I did feel like, you know, nobody was encouraging you to become an environmentalist in the 80s. Let's see. I need a good mushroom color. What am I going to do for a mushroom color? I'm just going to mix up some stuff and see if I get a good kind of pale gray. Maybe a pale warm gray. So I started with my Vampiric Mist and the Goblin Skin, and then I added a little bit of indigo. Of the indigo into it, because remember, orange and blue are complements, so they'll make a neutral color. And it actually ended up about right. That's kind of a warm gray. It's about the color I want on my mushroom caps, so there we go. That's cool, Shadow Raven. Well, you know, as long as nobody eats anybody else as far as, you know, sentient beings or thinking beings, I think we're okay if you want your animals to wander around on your porch, Francis. Long as the bears don't, you know, eat any people who are present, we're all good. I suppose if you keep them well fed enough, then they aren't looking at you as dinner. Alrighty. Get this nice round little mushroom. Yay, mushrooms. I love our mushrooms. And it's a similar color to our bone, but a lot colder. It's a lot more gray. We can warm it up if we want to, though. It's either deer equals Bambi or deer equals vermin, and there isn't an in-between, huh? Oh, that's really cool, Korniko. That's a great idea, too. You know, if the wildlife wants to eat and you don't want it to eat all your fish, then just give it some fish and, like, take advantage of, you know, people paying to go and watch that. I would go and watch that. Absolutely. So now I'm mixing a little bit more orange and a little bit more white in. I'm going to thin it. This is an example that I've mentioned before where I use, like, the top of my palette kind of like a wet palette. If I just need a little bit of a color, I'll just mix a puddle up there instead of taking up a well. Since I'm usually thinning it down, I don't, like, it doesn't dry right away because it's got a fair amount of water in it. And then I can use that to highlight up the couple of little things. So we only have a couple mushrooms here. We don't need a lot. We just need a bit. But yeah, I do that a lot. I mix kind of just a spot mix. I'll especially do it with things like lip and blush colors where I only need a little bit of it and I only need it for a short period of time. If I think I'm going to be working on a larger face for longer, then I definitely mix up an entire well of it. But for these little colors where I don't need very much, I do tend to just do a spot mix. If we want to suggest any little dots or patterns on our little mushrooms, this is the time to do so. I'm going to get closer. Boop. Although my mushrooms look really pale from here. Yep. 90% of osprey photos in the UK. That's funny. Yeah, I could see where animal control wouldn't want to tackle a bear. I mean, it's just a high-risk encounter, and they'd rather just let the animal leave on its own. It makes sense to me. I need to get a little bit more variation on my shrooms here. Got a little bit dotty there around the rim, but that's all right. I'll probably put a dark space on the underside of this mushroom because it's gonna have it's gonna be opening. So maybe I can put some little lines down there to suggest that. And I also forgot to do its little stem, so I need to get the stem. Let's see here. Just a little bit of the black indigo, a little bit orange. Once I've got a color like kind of worked out where it's like, oh yeah, this is the color I want, and I know how to mix it, I'll just do another little spot mix if I need it. Like forget to paint the stems here, then I'll just mix up some of what I just did. And you know what? If it's not perfect, it's fine. Oh yeah. Yeah, if it's in a really highly populated area, I could see how they would invest the effort into the bear trap scenario then. But I bet it would vary depending on the policy of, you know, your local animal enforcement. Little mushrooms. Hello, little mushrooms. I thought about making them red with white spots, but you know, this is the wrong sort of environment for those mushrooms. Mushrooms in caves tend to be the pale type mushrooms. They do not need vibrant colors. There we go. And now my little color is drying a little bit on the top, so I need to add some water. we go. Pick out our little details. They are round as well, so I'm going to mix a little bit more of a highlight and make sure that I keep my highlight round. When you are highlighting a rounded surface, use a rounded highlight. Highly recommended. Make sure, even if you have to put kind of a round spot, and then blend it in, go for it. Need to keep in mind the shape. And then you can always go back in and kind of blend across that line. All right, so we've got my little mushrooms kind of figured out and highlighted appropriately. Feel okay about them. I want to give their little base just a little bit. The foot, a little bit of a highlight, just so they stand out nicely. There they are. And they're pale, but they're really small, so they're not going to disrupt. They're gonna give a little bit of extra detail to all of this. Now we can go back to our oranges and grays and blues to bring up this area here, and then we're almost finished with the painting on the base. Need to get the stalagmites, little baby stalagmites. Oh yeah, that's pretty close to people there, Shadow Raven. That bear. Plus, kids are dumb. Okay, some kids are smart and would avoid a bear, and some kids are very dumb and would tempt Darwinism. So I could see how that would be rather risky, just because some kid would decide that they needed to be that kid. I knew kids like that when I was in school, where I was just facepalm. Like, seriously? But then as a kid myself, I really disliked other kids. I'm testing how fluid my other paints are. I think I need to add a little water to my brownish gray mix. Yeah. Yep. Everybody wants to live in a pretty environment. Yeah, but the pretty environment also has big animals that can be dangerous. I get it. The only time I've ever seen a bear is when I was long ago, my first trip by myself after college. I went up to Vancouver and north to Whistler, and I went in the summer off season, so I stayed in a ski lodge that was very inexpensive, and there was a bear just out in the outside of the ski lodge just one evening. It's my first time seeing a bear in person. Just wandered through and then it left, but I was like, that is a very large animal. I'm going to bring up some of these stalagmites. Still big enough to hurt. Yeah, little tiny bear. That is tiny for a bear. I think I just saw the Twitch chat reset. Are you guys having twitchiness? Are you seeing twitchiness? Is anybody getting some twitchiness other than me? Or am I alone in my twitchiness? So I'm stippling some highlights onto these guys. Because I want to suggest a little irregularity in the light, and I want to bring in some idea of texture, like rings of deposits. So stippling is always a good way to create texture on a otherwise smooth surface. It takes a while to build up, appreciable texture if you're trying to get something more subtle, but it doesn't take as long as you'd think. You just got to remember to keep your brushstroke kind of randomized. Just kind of dab it here and there with varying degrees of pressure. You don't want all your dots to look the same. Some of them can be dashes. But when you've got a smoothly sculpted surface that you want to suggest that is not totally smooth, stippling is your baby. Stippling in one form or another. Technically, stippling is a form of layering. You're not using a blended stroke, but you are putting a layer of paint that is wet over a layer of paint that has dried. So your brush stroke is different, but the core of the technique is the same. Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. I don't know if you... Sadillac. I'll just... Oh, I see. You could be Sadillac. It's like Cadillac, but Sadillac. I get it now. All right. Sorry, I'm slow. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yes, this is... I try to keep... And warn me if I get out of focus and stuff like this. Rock Troll has been a hard project just because he's so very big. It is difficult to keep everything in focus when I need it to be. All right, so... But yeah, so stippling is... Yeah, I really like stippling. It's one of my favorite techniques. I use it an awful lot. If you've got your paint the right consistency and you've got brush control, you can get really fine little details. Little specks and dots put on things. And it can be good for underpainting as well, because you can always glaze over the top of it to kind of minimize the texture a little bit if you get too strong. So, but yeah, it's a really good, and it's fun. I mean, because it's kind of fun, because it's kind of loose. You don't have to freak out and worry about being tight and detailed. You can just kind of relax and stipple a bunch of stuff, and then if you don't like it, you can kind of knock it out with more stipples. Yeah, Bearded Goblin, I love stippling too. It's fun. It's fun. And you can also, it's also nice because what you can do with stippling is you can practice your paint consistency and brush control. So like here, I could practice laying down tiny dots without getting big puddles. I could practice, oh, I'm getting big puddles. I need to unload my brush a little more. Oh, my dots are like transparent. So what's my paint consistency like, So you can use this as an opportunity to, to learn to internalize more of your core painting techniques. It's always an opportunity. I'm going to get some of my goblin skin and put a little bit more detail going back into the shadows here behind the foot. Just a little. I just want a little. There's not a lot of light going back in there. For the most part, everything back there is in shadow. But I want a little bit, just a little. You hit the rim of that and the front of this little stalagmite back there. You can see him. I need a little bit more of a shadow. At 300 pounds, maybe teeny tiny to you, but, it's definitely more than I weigh. It's still big enough to do damage. How about that? Maybe teeny for a bear. Morning, Inara. How's it going? We are stippling and generally almost finishing out here the troll base. We've been chatting about animals, wild animals that get into human areas. We have so far covered squirrels, ospreys, seagulls on steroids, bears, various other flora and fauna. Or I should say, we haven't covered flora yet, but we've covered fauna. Much fauna today. All right, so let's see. So I want a bigger, stronger highlight here than I have over here because there's some shadow here. So right now I've got what I want. That's not bad. More light toward the front of the base, less light toward the back. Want a little bit more on the floor here, I think, to be consistent. Because we know the light is coming down pretty strongly right here, so it's going to be hitting this area around his foot and those stalagmites. So I am going to thin that just a little bit. And bring in some stipples down here on the floor. To bring up this area. To be more in line with that. So I want kind of a sparkly almost. You know how caves almost sparkle when you get strong light on them? Like if they're moist, if they have a lot of moisture. Because of the wetness. So I want almost that effect. Yeah, like that. So you've got a nice, and they've got a dark shadow that hits, you know, right where that troll's leg is coming in. You've got that dark shadow. I want to lighten that shadow just a little bit. It's a little bit abrupt. That's a little better. Have it be there, but I want a little bit of lighter orange gray in it going backwards. Want a suggestion of other stuff because again, there would be a heavy shadow, but there would also be bounce light. So there, I think that's pretty good. And then I want a little bit more, probably around the foot. You don't want a really harsh shadow right around the foot necessarily. You want to make sure that it's kind of varied. Let's see here. That's better. All right, so that's the front of the base. More light up there, a little less light back here. I think I'm going to bring in a little bit of detail back here on these rocks, though. Just a little bit of finer stipple detail since I have it up front. But not quite as strong. Possums. Remember possums. Had a lot of those in Wisconsin. A lot of raccoons too. And some foxes. I've seen coyotes and bobcat. A coyote and bobcat in Texas when I was there. Here I see a lot of small animals because we're really far downtown. So I see a lot of interesting smaller birds. Like hummingbirds here. We'd have to go out to Yosemite again or out to some of the parks or forests nearby to get bigger fauna. So what I'm doing here is I don't want necessarily this back part to be as light, but I do want to bring in some of these little fine stipples so that it is obviously the same texture, it's just not picking up as much light. And I think I want all light here. There. Alrighty, I think we are looking pretty okay, actually. A little bit more specklies down on the floor here, I think. Just a little bit. So fine-tuning now because I've got everything blocked in that I want blocked in, but now I want to make sure that my texture is reading right with my light source, since this troll has such a strong light sourcing. Just want to add just a little bit of detail, a little bit tighter. This is where you can start really, really broad, but then, yeah, the more finer texture you add, the tighter everything gets. You don't want to go too crazy because you don't want to pull attention away from the troll. Basing is always a balance where you want it to look good and add to the story, but you don't want it to be so cool that it overwhelms your awesome troll. I'm going to back out a bit and look at how he looks from far out. He's looking pretty good. So see how, like, we've got this indigo here, and, you know, it's the same indigo that's shading these crystals and the same indigo that's shading the crystals up top. So it's all going pretty organically, and we've got this orange color that's in his foot that is also on the rocks, so that's all kind of pulling together. I need a little bit more of it over here, though. Free pink paint. Good, Cookie. Are possums the next raccoon? Is that what I'm seeing here? It's like pink is the new black, possum is the new raccoon. So I'm tightening this up and bringing in more of the warm tones. So I got a bit gray here, which is just fine, but I do have a pretty warm light. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of detail back here on the floor. There's a lot of dark shadows back here. I've got just one spot that I didn't really do a lot on back here, so I'm going to do it really quick. Mostly grayish. With just a touch of heat to it. Yeah, samples get left by the wayside when Reaper's having trouble, like, keeping up with orders. Like, pretty much when we can, at least when I was there, and this is always, like, you know, could be changed because I haven't been there in a while, but really it was like, if we had a sample, awesome, but it was not a priority to make a sample if we didn't have one. If Paint is rushing to keep up, or has a big deadline coming up, like for the Virtual Expo, where we're producing new colors, then samples, if we're producing new colors, it's possible that we're producing some samples because, you know, there was almost always a, oh, that didn't work out kind of thing going on. There's always that possibility when you're making new colors. But there's also the possibility that even if we do an oops, we don't have time to pump it into a sample because everything else is more higher priority. All right, so just, again, bringing up that with a little bit of that mixture of the goblin skin and the dungeon gray, just bringing up some detail. And I'm not being real tight here at all. I do need a darker shadow on the backside of this rock, for sure. No light back here. I did paint the outside of the base black, and I just blurfed over it, so I'll have to fix that. But these rocks that didn't get any indigo look really weird to me, so I have to come in and give them a nice dark shadow, and then worry about them. Here we are. It's a little bit better. Don't have to be real tight back here. And I think it's stretching time. It is stretching time. We've been here an hour. Stand up. If you have not stretched, if you have not gotten out of your chair, if you've been sitting there lumped over like we all are, get up and stretch. Dang it. It's important. Not just for me, who has a bum back. That sometimes translates into a bum neck and bum shoulders. But all of you, all y'all, get up and stretch. That's an order. Yeah, that's valid, Ultra Squid. It'd have to get really cold in there, though. it really depends on how actually cold it is around Reaper. If it's just like cold enough to snow, but it's not like super like in the teens or tens. Um, Indoors is always still a little bit warmer, and it would take a long time for stuff to freeze solid. So it really depends on how long Reaper goes without power. Like, they'd have to go for quite a long time, I think. Yeah, get your stretchies in. Stretchies, stretchies. I'm going to do my cat cows. And it's going to disappear onto the floor for a second in order to do her yoga stretches. Yay, yoga stretches. So yeah, do whatever you need to do to uncrick your shoulders and your spine, everybody. Take this opportunity to do some nice stretchies. Make your body feel happy. Or at least happier than it was. So yeah. 70? Nice, lunatic. Yeah, it takes a while, right? If it's 32. It really takes a while of exposure to that temperature because everything's going to drop very gradually, right? Yeah, and a bottle of water is different too, right? Because it's in isolation. Like, you'd notice if you had a 24 pack of water in your car that maybe it took a little longer for the bottles at the middle to freeze, right? So the nice thing about Florida is the heat, right? You don't get the cold, right? All right, I'm gonna do one more stretch, and then I'm gonna hydrate, and then we'll sit down and finish this thing. I like to put my hands over my head and kind of lean back into it. Make my body stretch in the opposite way. We always slump forward, and our necks always roll our head forward. So leaning back can pop your chest and stretch out your shoulders and give your neck some counter. Exercise your neck the other way, right? I'm learning that that's pretty important. All right. Back we come. Official Reaper Yoga Ball. You should tell Ed. That's the next Reaper piece of equipment. Let's see, where am I? I need to be over here. Ah! There we go. There I am. More or less centered. Yeah. I have a yoga ball I actually talked to David about because I don't feel like there's anywhere... If I blew it up, I don't feel like there's anywhere good to put it out of the way. We try to keep the apartment pretty neat. Except for the hobby room. Well, even the hobby room, though, since I did my revamp of the bookshelves and everything, the hobby room is very nice and neat lately. Relatively speaking. Meaning we don't have crap on the floor, so I can actually vacuum. Yeah, oh, Reaper lumbar cushion. Now that might be doable. Yeah, are you listening, Ed? Yeah, totally tell him that in the meeting, John and Justin. If John is watching. John might be power outed, who knows? I haven't seen John today. Alrighty, let's get all our paint limbered up, and we are now on the home stretch. I'm going to put in more shadows back here, more indigo. Because this is all the back of the base. So I'm actually going to put a glaze of indigo over everything. Which means I'm going to throw indigo at it and then I'm going to throw a bunch of water on top of it. Sometimes your glazes do not need to be precisely mixed. Sometimes you are just trying to get the general suggestion of coldness. See how dark that made everything? Now I'm going to take my brush. I've got a lot of pooling. Remember, you've thinned your paint down really a lot when you glaze, so you want to get those pools wicked off. So rinse out your brush, squeeze out the water, and then go back with the tip and just kind of like slurp off excess fluid. Because wherever you leave pooling when you are glazing, it is going to dry in coffee rings. You don't want that. You want it to be obedient. So now I've got a nice kind of darker shadow back here on the base. While the glaze is drying, if I want to take some extra paint, You never want to touch it with just your naked brush because you can kind of rip up your glaze and leave a spot. But you can introduce more paint while it's damp on the surface. So if I want to bring in more blue like that, I can. More indigo, I should say, to bring in that shadow. Because I really do want this back of the base part to be darker. Because the light on this piece is mostly on the front. You still want a little bit of light because we've got some light coming down on the back here. But in general, I want it to be darker. And then I can bring out a little bit here on the edge, past the foot, and on these rocks. I just use water Royal Llama. I don't like glazing mediums because I've talked about this before, but they will, because you're adding like some extra base to your paint, they'll make the paint act a little bit different. Usually it'll skin over a little bit earlier, so I wouldn't necessarily be able to do that trick that I'd done where I added in more paint easily. I just like the way that our paint acts with water. And so for me, glazing is just a matter of just thinning it. I tend to, if you like glazing medium, I don't know. It might be useful if it also extends drying time if you're trying to glaze larger areas and you're really in arid climates. But personally, I've never found it really necessary. It's kind of like training wheels for paint, but I think also that it, like I said, it makes a different texture. It can also make things gloss a little more, which I don't like. So now I'm taking some of my kind of light grayish orange and picking up some details again that I knocked down when I glazed. But yeah, my glazes are just done with water. I just do them fast, and I tend to do them in smaller areas. So like, this is a relatively small area. If I was glazing this leg, I'd probably do the calf muscle, maybe down to the back of the foot. I tend to glaze in sections, so that way the fact that the paint does dry fairly quickly is not a detriment. I actually want it to. I don't have to worry as much. I do a lot of spot glazing Llama, where I do just little glazes here and there, just to just to bring something up a little bit or down a little bit, or to make a blend. So I brought that back down. I brought the rear of this down, and now I'm using this color, this tan that I mixed, which is this, and the white, the Spectral Vampiric Mist. It's not really white. It's just kind of white. To bring stuff back up now. Just to suggest a little bit of bounce light. And not to leave anything like really without any texture. Bring in a little bit on the back of here. Because everywhere you've got light in a wet environment, if there's even a tiny bit, it's going to pick up a little bit. So that looks good. That's good. That's good. This rock back here needs a little attention. This little stalagmite could use a little more attention. This back rim of here could use a little more attention. There. There we are. All right. Let me take a look at this guy now. Front looks good. Side looks good. That looks good. That's going back there good. That's good. That's good. The back is darker. I'm okay with it. That's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and Reaper tote bag that velcros onto our walkers. Oh my lord. You guys. Yes, the aging geek population. We're all going to be playing D&D in nursing homes eventually. Alrighty, so I've got my black indigo here. I think I just want to go for it. I wanted to suggest a little bit of variation in the bottom of this pool, so I think I will do that with a little bit of this brown. I want the pool to be mostly the black indigo, because everything that's dark and wet is going to get darker. But I want to also suggest that a little bit of light is falling just a little bit back onto this area. so you can see a little bit of rock texture underneath the water. Like I wanted just a little bit of stuff here and there. And again, I'm going to be using a stippling stroke for this to kind of lay out little areas where I think the stones might suggest that they might be catching the light just a little bit. I'm going to try to make this evident to you guys. We'll see if we can get the camera in a good place. You can kind of see how I'm bringing up these little areas. I just want a little bit of stipple down here to suggest that there's texture. And that the light might be catching it through the water. Because this water is really shallow. So that's not a far-fetched idea. So there. Just a little bit of texture, and then, yeah. You can get some cool effects by putting texture under a layer of gloss glaze or water effects. Alright, I'm going to leave a shadow behind the stalagmites, though. So let's see if I can get that to show. So you guys can see, yeah, see how I've done kind of a stipple pattern back there. Okay. Now, the question is we using water effects? Are we using water effects, or are we... I believe that. I believe that. I think it should be called Lunatic Design. I mean, heck, why wouldn't you play D&D every day if you were in a nursing home and had a good gaming group? Heck yeah. All about it. So, okay, when you're doing something this small, guys, when you're filling something this small with a water effect, you don't need to use like the actual water effects or resin. You can actually use something like gloss sealer. I often will use a gloss sealer if I feel like it. It takes a lot more layers. If you have something like this, so this is old, this is ancient, I've had this for forever, but it's a very heavy bodied gloss. So this is a very thick gloss, as opposed to the Reaper gloss, which is really thin. So you would need a lot more layers of the Reaper gloss, but I have used the Reaper gloss in this way. Do I have the Reaper gloss? Yes, I do. I actually have my prototype, but it is the Reaper gloss. It's the original gloss. Let me see. Do I have the... I'm just looking around to see what I have over here to use. I think my other Reaper gloss sealer is in one of my other bags, so I think it's out of luck. It might be out of luck. I thought I'd left one up on my my thing, but apparently I just left the prototype bottle. Yeah, if the Watercolors gloss is heavy body, then yeah, you could use that. It really is just how heavy do you want it, how thin do you want it, you know. But you can, my point is you can use gloss sealer. You don't have to use something like the other thingy that you would use. Would be something like Realistic Water from Woodland Scenics. This is something that's made for pouring bigger parts of water. It's a lot like a gloss sealer. It takes a while to dry and it does evaporate just like these guys do. To get a good thick layer, you need to usually do more than one coat of this, and you need to give it a good long time to dry. I often will use my pokey tool to kind of guide and spread it when I put it in there. So let us see what we can do. First of all, let's make sure that it's going to come out of the spout and I don't need to use the pokey tool to begin with. By putting a drop on the cap. Yeah, that's pretty thick stuff. You could also put a pool of it in your palette first. This has been in here a while. This is a pretty thick gloss. I may actually add a little bit of water to it before I put it in. So you can add water to your gloss sealer as long as it's an acrylic water-based sealer, which is just fine. It's going to make it flow a little bit better if it's getting kind of goopy. Just like paint, sealers will thicken over time. I'm going to add just a little bit of water. What that means is that it'll evaporate a bit more, but it will flow a little better. So I will need to, where did I put mine? I took the top off and then I promptly lost it. There it is. So I put about 10 drops of water in that, in a bottle that has easily 350 to 400 drops of water. It's a very small amount, but it's enough to make it a little bit more fluid. All right, what I usually don't use is a brush to guide my gloss sealer. I usually use a pokey tool because I can clean it out of the pokey tool a lot easier if it dries. Let's see here. boop, boop, boop. So I'm going to put a big glob in the middle. I'll kind of let it settle out. Put a bigger glob. It should slowly fill the depression there. I may just use gravity, but often there'll always be a little crack. And don't worry about bubbles. You can spread it and then at the end just blow on it. But if you want it, because it is kind of thick, if you want it to spread over to like this area, see over to this side area, then you can kind of guide it. I'm not even really spreading it so much as enabling it to flow there. Kind of using my pokey tool to define the area that it's flowing to. I'll get those bubbles out of there eventually. You do want the bubbles to pop, and you don't want to blow them all over the place. So I'm going to use my pokey tool to spread it right up to the edge of the dark area that I defined with my paint. And up to the base of the mushrooms. Then I'm going to sit it down. See how it goes? I've still got to... There, one little blow, one little puff of breath. You got to be careful because this stuff will spatter, right? So... And we don't want to tilt it. The problem now is I don't want to tilt it too far back because I don't want my gloss to tip out and run. It's very slow moving, but it is definitely self-leveling. So at this point, and you don't necessarily, the thicker a coat you put in, the longer it's going to take to dry. So once you've got a nice coat, a nice puddle like that, let it go. Let it go. And it will definitely, like it'll have crept up the sides a little bit, probably by the time it dries, leaving a glossy effect. If you need to, though, the nice thing about this, I mean, you can just paint over the top with acrylic to bring it more toward a matte. I could still muck around with this a little bit more if I wanted to, but there's no point. I've got it exactly where I want it. I have eliminated all the bubbles, and it's perfectly placed. Some glosses will begin to skin over very quickly, so you've got to stop working it fairly quickly, as Grey Wolf has mentioned. Also, don't rush the dry. You don't want to create... I see a tiny bubble. Pardon me while I kind of move it out of there. The other thing I will kind of do sometimes with tiny bubbles is I'll just try to pick them up on the end of my pokey tool. Get them out of there. Failing that, I'll move them to the extreme edge. Because if it's a tiny bubble and it's embedded down in the surface of a thick body, then you're just, yeah, kind of screwed. You just got to deal with it. Oh yeah, gloss sealer and water effect. I mean, it's much the same stuff. I mean, you're almost always dealing with just a high acrylic base, and the difference is whether it's a heavy body or a thin bodied. Now, acrylic does tend to be thin bodied by itself, so usually if it's heavier bodied, you know, there's something else chemical going on, but they're still very similar products. I mean, it'll evaporate. Kariniko. So it'll cling to the surfaces. It won't dry like with a well. It won't dry like that. It will shrink down. That's why you put on numerous layers. But that's true even with the realistic water. The Woodland Scenics realistic water. You have to put multiple layers on it to build it up if you want a thicker one. It takes a while. The fastest way to do thick water is resin pour, but then we don't want that for tiny puddles, and you don't really need it for a tiny puddle. Tiny bubbles and it's your fault. Yes, it is. But yeah, the gloss sealer is going to shrink just like a realistic water will shrink. But again, if you're doing little puddles, just do a couple of layers. Like it might take 4 or 5. I think I did 3. Where did David put away my my secret weapon terrain tiles? I did some water on those. But yeah, sadly I can't tilt it too much toward you guys now because I have to let it sit. So, but look, we did stuff. And any questions? Any questions while we are sitting here? And I don't think, maybe I can move my arm. Hold on. Let me do troll. Let me scoot troll and see if I can scooch my camera arm out. There, you can kind of see it. I have limited mobility here on my camera arm. There it is. You can kind of see. Let me get troll kind of tipped up on something. Maybe I can tip him up on my knife. But I don't want to. The problem is I just don't want the water to tilt. So you can see my puddle. 2-part resin is usually used for bigger pores, Kerniko. Bigger pores. Oh, a reboot of 40K? Yeah, well, GW reinvents itself every 2 years and people keep buying. As they've got no reason not to do it when their fan base loves it, so it is what it is. Yeah, you can use 2-part epoxy glue for puddles. Yep. There's a lot of different things you can use. I mean, the bottom line really is to test it. Like, maybe just sculpt a base with some puddles in it and test different things and see if you like the effect. I know from experience that I do like the effect of gloss sealer. You doing tiny bubbles, it works just fine for me. If I really wanted like to make it fill faster, I would use something thick like the micro gloss. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I mean, experiment. Yep, yeah, I sculpted one in there. It's kind of, I actually, this is the base that comes with the troll for the most part, Cetilac, but then I sculpted extra mounds of rocks and little stalagmites that are starting to grow, and then I did this little pool, like, that's under his arm that you can see there. And I painted it all dark, which is probably why you didn't see it up to now, because when you paint something dark on a miniature, you tend to not look at it. That the viewer will tend to ignore it. So I cleverly made you ignore it until I filled it with goo. And now it's filled with goo. So I'll leave it to sit. It'll probably take all day to dry this first layer. I'll take a look at it then, and I'll probably add another layer to it. At least one. Yeah, there's all sorts of resins and stuff. I mean, the reason, honestly, guys, the reason I like to just use gloss sealers of various types for this sort of a small puddle effect is that it is not toxic, no fumes, no smell, easy pour, let it dry, not fiddle with it, don't have to mix anything, boom, it's done. So, yes, you can use all sorts of resins and epoxies and all that stuff, but they smell, or they require combining, or they require heating, or they require pouring into a, it's like way too much trouble to do just a little puddle, in my opinion. Way too much trouble. I would much rather do something that doesn't smell up my apartment, that I just pour in, shape, and leave. Done. Oh, yeah. Well, don't worry, we're still working on the metallics, Jabberwock. So, I mean, when we get back to Dwarf next week, I guess. Right? Or maybe Friday. Yeah, Friday. So, Kitty Cat is tomorrow. And then Living Statue is Thursday, and Dwarf is Friday. So on Friday, make sure to show up. And then you can ask all the questions you've been storing up. Yeah, and good ventilation, right? Lunatic, exactly. Yeah, just use what you have on hand. I mean, you can use it for all sorts of things. Like if you're gonna use gloss effects, then you can also use gloss sealer to create. Well, we're gonna use it actually on the Dwarf on Friday to create some washes, glazes. I don't know what you'd call them. They're really more texture effects. We're gonna use them to create shading for the metallics. Yes, exactly, Nepharsis. Yep. The epoxies tend to have a heat cure. So, you got to be careful with it. I mean, David uses a pouring resin, I think. And I like the stuff that David uses. It doesn't smell a lot. He seems to, other than seeping, you've got to make sure that you've enclosed it so that it doesn't drain or seep or get through your seams. But otherwise, David seems to have really good effects doing really good results doing the stuff that he uses. I should ask him what it is. Yeah, be careful with epoxies. Yeah, I mean, especially small stuff like this, right, Nepharsis? Like, the big stuff, like, Actually, you know what? Let me see. I think he's making a latte. Let me ask David what he used for mermaid, and maybe I'll dig out mermaid and ask if I can show her. Hold on, guys. Hey, David, can I show them your mermaid, and what water thing did you use? Are you there? Oh. All right, guys. He's in a meeting, so he's got his headphones on. But I stole mermaid. He'll have to just yell at me later. But I don't know what water thing he used. I'll have to ask him later. But this is the best, honestly, the best water effect I've ever seen anybody do. At all, period. Let me get this back here. So this is David's mermaid. Yeah. Let me get the camera up a bit. One sec. Because she's better when you can see her. So this is the mermaid. She's up on a tower of rusted metal from a ship. And then there's the water effect. So it's a transparent resin. He actually shaped the top. He made a reverse mold of how he wanted the wave formations to go. This was a Crystal Brush finalist. And then he drilled into the bottom of the resin and painted it from the inside to make it look like the ship stuff was coming down through the water. So yeah, he spent a lot of time on this piece for Crystal Brush for the last Crystal Brush competition. And then he sculpted the barnacles and stuff. So this is probably that, like I said, the best water effect I think I've ever seen. Maybe the other one would be who's his name? He's out here in the Bay Area. Seth. Seth did an AT-AT in a river that's like got the water like rushing past it. Like it's a big piece with a big resin pour. That's also an amazing piece. Yeah, this is, yes. Yeah, David did do a tutorial on how he did this on his webpage, I think, which is Light Miniatures, LIGHT-miniatures.com. Yeah, exactly. He messed around. He had to do 3 pours with this sucker and to get the color and everything right. But yeah, so it shows, it's just really awesome, isn't it? It's just lovely. So yeah. So this is the mermaid from, they don't do stuff anymore, Origin Art. And she's impossible to find. We keep hoping that she will be reproduced. I have a copy. We found one, I think, on eBay. But he had to look like for a year and a half to find this one because they had. You can find it on lightminiatures.com. I think he's got a blog there, and he, I think, did it. Yeah, this one. Well, we keep hoping because Origin stuff has been brought back by Black Sun before, so we keep hoping. He's on a call, Dogfather. I can't interrupt him. I could steal his mini, but I couldn't interrupt him. But I'll find out for you guys and tell you at some point. But he probably says on his blog. So lightminiatures.com. If you go there, it's a really simple website. You won't have trouble finding stuff. It's very he's got a bunch of tutorials. He's got the highest rated OSL tutorial on the web. So there you go. There's an awesome water. It looks so cool compared to my tiny puddle. But yeah, we've got tiny puddle on Troll. But yeah, he probably does say what he uses on the blog. I'm going to put her back. Actually, I'll put her here, and then I'll put her back after the stream, because we're about ready. Yeah, we are ready. So, Justin, who's out there for us to raid? Got to reposition my camera now. Luckily, that's easy with this camera. Boop. So we did our puddle. So today, we painted mushrooms, and we painted our base. We detailed it, we used some stippling, we talked about doing big glazes to darken everything down. It's cold, Reaper John, I'm sorry. And we did a little pour of Reaper Gloss Sealer to make a puddle in our base to suggest a watery environment, like the mushrooms weren't doing that already. And I can't tilt it so you can see it because that will make it dry funky. We're rating Zambies, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today. I will see you again tomorrow. We're going to work on our kitty cat rogue. Our Tabaxi rogue, our catfolk rogue from Julie. All right? Have a great one, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow morning.